Hello and welcome, everyone. I hope you are enjoying this beautiful day during Earth Week. We're so excited for you to join us to celebrate a little pre celebration for Earth Day, which is officially tomorrow. We are here live at the Blue River, which is in southern Oklahoma and is in the Chickasaw and the Choctaw Territory. The Nature Conservancy, we protect around 2 miles of the Blue River at our Okayanali Preserve. And Okayanali in Chickasaw means flowing water, which is really cool, right? So anyway, happy almost Earth Day, everybody. We're really delighted to get to share this Nature Connects Us webinar opportunity with you. Today, we're going to have a virtual hike with one of our very own staff members, Kim Elkin, and she's our Watershed Health Director, and she'll be joining us here in just a minute. So I'm curious, though, I want to know, where are you all from? Find that chat button on your screen. Sometimes it's down in the bottom, sometimes it's at the top. Find that chat button and tell us, where are you located? I see Meg from Edmond, Diane, Christopher from, oh my goodness, these are going fast, Rosalie from Tulsa, Blanchard. All right. We got all kinds of folks. Oklahoma City, Water Resources Board. Great to see you. Thanks for joining us, friends. Oh my goodness. Look at these all come in. John and Norman, Betty in Bartlesville. Hey, Betty. Hey, Barry. So good to see. Hi, Ruth. So many names on here, y'all. We haven't seen you in person in so long. I can't talk too much about it or I'll cry because I miss you all. And we all do. We miss our peeps and are excited and eager to get back out into some field trips with everybody. Baldwin City, Kansas. Hey, what's happening, Floyd? Good to see you. Thanks for joining us from Kansas. So the way that this will work today is Kim is going to guide us on a little hike along through the Blue River, through the headwaters of the Blue River, and she's going to talk to us some more about that. But that will occur for about 15 to 20 minutes. And then after that, we're going to have a question and answer session where you get to submit questions for Kim. The way that you will do that is not through the chat. Hi, Johnny from Tupelo. Good to see you. But the way that we will do that is actually through the Q&A section. So hi, Dwight. Haven't seen you in forever, buddy. Find the Q&A button. It's either at the top of your screen or it's at the bottom. If you don't see it, you might see a button with 3 dots and you can click it. And whenever you click it, it will possibly have a Q&A button there. And so that's where you can go in and type in your questions. We will only entertain questions that are in the Q&A, so please don't put them in the chat. And then also you'll be able to vote on your favorite questions. So we encourage everyone to open up that Q&A button whenever we get to that portion of today's session. And you can vote on your favorite questions. The questions with the most votes are the ones that we will ask first. We are about to introduce our guest today, and Kim is our Watershed Health Director. She shares her birthday with Earth Day. April 22nd is Kim Elkin's birthday. So we're real excited to get to share this event with her and share her with you all and celebrate together. And just really excited to be able to get to share this commonality here. So what an honor for her to get to share her birthday with Earth Day. So here we go. I'm going to turn it over to Kim, and we're going to have a fun virtual field trip. I hope that you brought your digital water boots or your virtual waders or something. We've got ours on. We're ready, and we're going to go get wet. It's going to be a fun adventure, and we hope that you guys can feel and see and touch and smell everything just as good as if you did in person. And if not, we hope that you can make it out someday whenever things reopen to having field trips for the public. So good to see you all. Thanks for joining us. And without further ado, Miss Kimberly Elkin.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the headwaters of the Blue River watershed. You all should see a map that shows you, kind of give you an orientation where you're at. Sorry you can't be here with us live during this event. It's really beautiful today. It's 50 degrees and sunny. And actually, as you go upstream here from where we're at right now, this is the headwaters of the Blue River. And if you think about it, there are a lot of springs within this watershed. And so for those of you that might be familiar, this is part of the Arbuckle-Simpson Aquifer, and that is an underground lake. Just think of it as an underground lake. So it's that groundwater feeding those springs and those seeps that are contributing to this stream. And what's really cool about this area is that it's very narrow. So a lot of you are probably used to seeing like the big river, the big Blue River. For those of you that have been here, it's very wide in a lot of sections. Well, when you're in the headwaters, it's very narrow. You have these places where these springs come up. There's a lot of cold water dependent species within this area, which as we walk along in the stream, we're going to try to find some of those critters for you as well. One thing I want you all to keep in mind is that 71% of the earth is water, right? But only 3% of that is fresh water, and less than 1% of that water we can actually drink. And so think about those things as we're walking along. One of the things you're really going to notice with spring-fed headwater areas, it's crystal clear water, right? You can see to the bottom, and you're going to see that as we walk along. We'll show you some close-ups of that as well. And one of the other things I want to point out while we're thinking about it is that think about water and how important it is, right, to your life. This area of the Blue River and Arbuckle-Simpson Aquifer feeds, provides water to about 150,000 people in the area. And so towns like Durant, Connerville, areas that are south of Ada get their water from the Blue River, and Ada also gets their water from the Arbuckle-Simpson Aquifer. So we are going to walk along the stream, and we're going to show you some of the critters that depend on this headwater area.
All right, we're seeing a lot of chats coming in that you're not seeing the video of Kim. So we're just going to take a pause right quick so that we can make sure we get that up on the screen. Larissa is in the background working our technical, and hopefully she'll be able to get that resolved here pretty quick. We can spotlight Kim's screen, make sure y'all can see her. Y'all see her now? Good. Thank you, Christopher.
Hello.
All right, cool. Super. Fantastic. I'm going on mute. It's all you.
All right. So hopefully you guys heard everything that I was talking about there, even though you couldn't see me. Pretty hard, you have technical difficulties when you're out in the field, but we're going to walk along the stream and we're going to show you some of the different critters that depend on this habitat as well. And one of the things I want you to all think about too, so when you look at this area, there's lots of trees, there's lots of vegetation, and we refer to these places as riparian buffers, right? They are extremely important, particularly with rivers. They provide good areas for water quality. It helps filter that water. You got that vegetation on the bank and all these trees. It also helps slow down stream bank erosion. So you won't see as much erosion in here as we walk along the stream. You will see some algae along the way. We'll point out some of those things as we go here, and let's see what we can find. So I just have my D-frame aquatic dip net. We use this a lot to capture macroinvertebrates. And a lot of times we will look at like maybe 100-meter sections within a stream. We'll look at different areas. Like what you're looking at here right now is a nice pool habitat. And so we would go in here and we would kind of kick up some of this substrate and some of the critters in here and see what we can find. And what's really cool, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a lot of these critters in this bucket, and then as we get a little further downstream, we'll go through and show you the types of critters that exist here in this stream. And what's really cool too, so I talked a lot about spring water, the cold water dependent species. So we have darters in here, we have southern red-belly dace, lots of macroinvertebrates. In fact, the diversity is very high. I'll show you like a rock that has some mayflies on it. And mayflies are really cool. Like a lot of you might not realize this, but mayflies, things like dragonflies, are born in the water. And then they fly out of the water, right? Just like mosquitoes as well. And so they're very dependent on the water for their life cycle. And so you can think about it this way. It's almost like, your virtual water kind of floating around. You got your dragonflies and your mayflies flying around, and that came from water, right? So I'm going to show you some places that macroinvertebrates like to colonize. They really like these flat rocks. And a lot of times you'll see like on the underneath sides of these, right now I don't see any mayflies on here, but I do find a snail. And so what's really cool is they'll attach to the bottom sides of rocks and they'll feed off this algae on the rock, right? And so that's how they're getting their nutrients. And a lot of times when I'm looking for macroinvertebrates, you know, I'll go in and I'll make sure that I place that rock back down the way it was, exactly where I found it. And one of the things too that's cool about being in an area like this, I talk about spring-dependent species, and so there's a lot of darters. For those of you that aren't familiar with darters, and I'll show you some, you know, as we collect those and get further down, they actually don't have a swim bladder, which is really cool because a lot of fish, right, they're floating in the water column, right? So darters don't have a swim bladder, so they're darting around on the bottom. Really cool stuff. And what's really cool about them, this is their spawning season right now. They'll lay their eggs on the underneath sides of these flat rocks in the stream. And what's really cool is that the male actually cares for the eggs. He actually goes in there, fans that stuff with his tail, and he picks the fungus off those eggs, and he will actually take care of those eggs until they hatch. So that's pretty cool. I don't actually have an example to show you of those actual eggs on the rock, but I will show you some different fish and macroinvertebrates as we move through the stream. And what you guys are probably seeing as we walk too, so there's a lot of, there's some algae in here. And so algae is natural, right? And so you'll see like a lot of filamentous algae in the stream. That's natural with sunlight, but then there are also things that may be going on upstream on the land, right? So for those of you that might not be familiar with a watershed, it's a point with which all of the water and comes from like a certain outlet. And so think of it this way. So you've got the headwaters of the stream, right? And it's flowing down into the larger portions of the Blue River. The Blue River eventually flows into the Red River. The Red River eventually flows into the Mississippi River, and then eventually goes into the Gulf of Mexico. And so you think about a watershed, a lot of the practices that might be going on that could contribute to more algae in the stream, different things like fertilizers, a lot of nitrogen, phosphorus, those sorts of things can contribute to algae in the water as well. So as you're walking along and you see these things, some of it's natural, but some of it could be due to man-made activities. So as we're walking along here, you know, it's really hard to catch fish, particularly with a dip net. You know, I really wanted to show you guys macroinvertebrates. We also have some fish that we'll show you here in a minute. And you know, a lot of times we'll use like a seine net to catch fish. This is more designed for macroinvertebrates, but occasionally you'll catch a darter. You'll catch little minnows in there. So maybe as we get down here, I'll show you some of those critters here in a minute. And what's really cool too, you'll see along the bank, you'll see like these formations, the geologic formations. This is actually granite rock. So a lot of the geology within this aquifer is granite. There's also a lot of areas where, you know, I talked about the aquifer and being kind of an underground lake. And so that water is bubbling up through those geologic formations. This water is actually pretty cold. It's probably in the 50s. I actually haven't measured the temperature today. But a lot of these spring-dependent areas, the water temperatures in the 50s, even in the summertime. So it actually feels pretty good if you can come to these areas in the summer and cool off for the hot summers that we have here in Oklahoma. So as we get down here, I'm going to show you some of the critters that I've collected. What I'm going to do is dump the critters in this net, and then I'll show you some of the different ones that live here. And then I'm going to let them go back in the stream. So bear with me for a minute here. I'm not used to having a live audience as I'm collecting critters. So y'all are making me nervous, but I really got to collect some stuff and show you what's going on in here. You know, and one thing to keep in mind when you're doing sampling too, you want to make sure they're not out of the water for a long time, particularly these spring-dependent species. And I like to try to keep some water on them as I'm sampling. And so Here we actually have a darter. I talked about them being in their spawning season. The males have very brilliant colors. This one is actually an orangethroat darter, and you can see it's kind of got this orange coloring underneath its chin here, and they have very bright, vibrant colors. They have vertical green bars that go down the length of them, and I'm probably going to let this one go just so that it doesn't get too shocked being out of its environment too long. And let's see what else we got in here. I think we got another orange belly darter. They're pretty common in here and in the Blue River. In fact, one of the things I didn't mention, in the Blue River, there are currently 82 fish species, so that's a lot. But in these headwater areas where it's very narrow, there, a lot of these species are very dependent on cold water areas, springs. It's like a refugia for them, right? It's an area to get away from predators. And so you're not going to find like your smallmouth bass and things like that in here. You're going to find more of the smaller species that can handle these types of temperatures. They're very dependent on that for their life cycle. And I talked about macroinvertebrates, and there's quite the diversity of macroinvertebrates as well in the Blue River. And actually, this is a Riffle Beetle. And what's really cool about these guys, you'll see them floating around on the surface, right? And if you hold it up to your nose, they kind of give off a citrusy smell. So it smells like oranges. It's kind of like a defense mechanism, right? And so that's pretty cool about these guys. And you'll see them just floating around, swimming around, doing their thing in the water. And they're important. Macroinvertebrates feed the fish that are in here. They provide the nutrients that the fish need. And I'm pretty sure I have another darter in here. Actually, this is another one, another species of darter, very small, called the least darter. It's a spring-dependent species as well. And so you'll find those a lot in these headwater areas. And I did mention mayflies. I know that I have a mayfly in here somewhere. And I'm pretty sure we got a dragonfly as well. But I'll show you some snails that we got. So there's different diversity of snails. Like I said, they attach to the undersides of rocks and feed on algae. So you'll see a lot of those in here. So what's really cool, for those of you who have never spent a lot of time in a stream, or maybe some of you have never been to one before, like I really encourage you to just pick up a rock, right? Pick up a rock and see like what's under there. There could be caddisflies, mayflies. Caddisflies build their houses under here, little rock houses, little stick houses. So, those sorts of things, a lot of people don't realize the diversity that exists until you actually get out here and see what is going on. Let's see if I can find you guys any more cool critters. I know I got some snails. And actually, this is another species of fish. That's actually a mosquito fish. A lot of people refer to them as gambusia, if you really want to know the scientific name. But we're going to put him back in here. And let's see if I can find y'all anything. Oh, yeah, mayfly, because I kept mentioning mayflies, right? So, mayflies, these guys are pretty cool. You can kind of see he's pretty flat, right? So he's got that flatness that he needs to be. They're pretty flat. And so that's kind of a design that they have so that they can be on that underneath sides of a rock. And what's cool about these macroinvertebrates is that they filter whatever's in the water, right? With their gills, and they're filtering the nutrients in that water. And so that's what's really cool about them. And a lot of times you'll find them in riffles. And so a lot of those nutrients are being brought to them as they are on the rock within the stream. And I know I have a dragonfly. It might take me a minute to find it. A lot of times, when you're sampling, you'll have all this vegetation. Leaves are good detritus to have in the stream. These provide a good organic nutrients for the critters in the stream. And so, when you're sampling, you really got to get in there and see if you can find the critters. And so if you're the type of person that really likes to find tedious things, this is the job for you. You really want to figure out, what all those critters are. I highly encourage you to get out in the stream and just see what's in there. And I think we're getting down towards the end as far as the critters. I can't find the dragonfly that I had. It may have been hiding within that leaf pack, but you know that it was in there as well. Oh, yes. And so this dragonfly larva that I did find, it kind of looks like an alien. It's kind of cool. And, that's what's really cool is to think, about the importance of water and where things are born, and then you actually see them flying out when you're out and about, flying out on the land. And so that's just a really cool aspect of all of this to think about. And I think that's all the critters I have. One of the things, as I go along as well, I'll find trash. And so I'll pick up what I can. You think about like when a big flood happens or whatever, things that are coming off of the land, they end up in the water. And so I'll just pick up whatever I can. And, I encourage you, if you're out in any water body, just to pick up that trash, because that can have a huge impact on the ecosystem as well. So yeah, we're going to walk a little further downstream here. One of the things too, as we kind of reflect on Earth Day and, the how we interact with nature, you think about the human body, right? The human body is like almost 70% water. And you think about all the things that we need for our organs, for our brain to function, is all dependent on water. And so it's extremely important that we do what we can to take care of our water resources. I think that the longest a person can be without water is 4 days. I've seen 3 days, but I think 4 days is the max. And so I guess one of the key takeaways as you think about protecting our water resources, it's extremely important. It's important for human existence. It's important for us to understand the diversity that exists within that and to protect these areas. And so as you kind of look around and you see all the natural rock formations and the vegetation, really think about how important it is for land protection and water protection, and how important it is just for us as humans that we're very dependent on that, right? And so it's just extremely important that we just take care of our natural resources. And hopefully you guys got a good feel for what the headwaters of a river are. And it may not be quite what you expected because it's very narrow, but just think, water begins somewhere. This is like the area where water begins, right? All that water bubbling out of that geology under the ground, that aquifer, feeding the water. You got groundwater and surface water. And think about all the people in this area that are dependent on that. People that have groundwater wells. People pull their water directly from the Blue River. Durant is an example. So I appreciate everyone's time, and I hope you learned something, and hopefully I didn't ramble too much. And I think that's all I got. Thank you.
All right. Wasn't that awesome, everybody? Hang on one second. Okay, how's the audio now? This should be much better. Okay, everyone. So wasn't that awesome? And it was so exciting to get to hear from our birthday girl all about the different little critters and the formation of the river and the streams and how important all these pieces are and how connected they are, not just to each other, but to ourselves as well. So we are ready to begin the question and answer session. So if you do, please find that Q&A button. Even if you don't have a question, find the Q&A button and vote for your favorite questions. We are going to begin our session here with Kim. And let's see if we can't find a little rock right up here for Kim to sit on so she can get comfortable for this question and answer session. Go on in and vote for your favorite ones. All right, so we've got some questions for you, Kimmy. I'm going to get settled in here too. I'm going to take this off of me and we're going to put this back onto Kim. Lots of questions flowing in. Let me rotate this here. All right, Kim, all eyes are on you. Okie dokie, here we go with the Q&A. One with the most votes at this time. The question is, what is unique about the Blue River that the Nature Conservancy is working to protect it, and what parts are accessible to the public?
Okay, you're gonna have to repeat that because it was echoing there for a minute. Sorry.
All right. What is unique about the Blue River to TNC that we're working to protect it, and what parts are accessible to the public?
So I guess a big thing about the Blue River is that it's very biologically diverse. I know I mentioned there were 82 fish species, right, within the Blue River watershed, but there also historically were 23 mussel species. Like places like this, you're not going to find mussels. They're more in the actual main part of like channels, the main part of the Blue River. So from where we're at here, they'd be further downstream. And as far as accessibility, there is the Blue River Wildlife Management Area, which is a few miles. I'm not going to give you the exact mileage downstream of here. That is an area that is accessible to the public. But actually, the majority of the Blue River watershed is privately owned. So all of this area that we're in right now is privately owned.
All right, thank you, Kim. The next popular question is, are there any stretches of the Blue River open to the public for paddling?
I would say like the Blue River WMA, you can paddle within sections there. You know, and as far as being able to paddle for the public, I mean, you'd really have to know a landowner within the area to get access, right? So you could put in and take out. So the answer to your question is it's very limited just because it's private ownership. But if you happen to know someone that could give you access, you could do it that way.
And another option I will throw out there is stay tuned to CNC field trips that we announce through our newsletters, on our website, and social media. And those are other opportunities to get out and explore these areas. And we do often have field trips here at the Blue River. Of course, once we get a little further out of this pandemic and we get approval to be able to get out and about with the public, we will definitely get those field trips posted. All right, our next question. Thank you for that question. Next one is from Rod. Oh, hi, Rod. I talked to you this morning. Is the portion we are seeing in the field trip 2 miles of the Conservancy territory? And she already answered that, but do you want to expand on it anymore?
No, I think we're good. I mean, you know, we own a lot of areas that like along the larger stretch of the Blue River, like the main stem. And so, yeah, I'd say that's pretty much what we own.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So our next question comes from Trisha. Trisha wants to know, are invasive species a problem at the Blue River?
Yes, they are a problem. There's a lot of invasive plant species. So there's Chinese privet here. For those of you on the phone, eastern red cedar, which actually is native to Oklahoma, is actually considered an invasive species simply because we don't have enough fire on the landscape anymore to take care of that. And actually, what's a really interesting fact about eastern red cedar is that it can take up as much as 6 gallons of water a day. And so there are a lot of efforts to eradicate species like eastern red cedar and the Chinese privet as far as the things that we're doing on the landscape. So yes, invasive species are an issue. You know, and as far as aquatic invasive species, I mean, there have been some bait bucket introductions, like for instance, there's a ringed crayfish, which I know we didn't find any crayfish today, but they're actually native to Northeast Oklahoma, and a lot of scientists think that they were introduced like from fishermen that may have brought a crayfish here to the Blue River. So we have ringed crayfish here. So I guess in a sense that's an invasive, but there are corbicula as well. That is an Asiatic clam that's been in a lot of waterways for a long time now. I mean, they do provide food for muskrats and that. So I guess it depends on how we view invasive species and the benefit that they may provide some creatures if they've been here for a really long time.
Okay, so thank you, Kim, for answering that. And my attention got distracted while she was doing that because we have some of those fun little beetles, those water beetles.
A Riffle Beetle, yeah.
I'm gonna zoom in on them real quick. Hopefully y'all can see them. They just zoom and zig and zag on top of the water. It's fun. I think you could have races with them. Pretty cool. If I would have known about those when I was a kid, I would have been collecting them all day long. Was there any other information you want to share with us about those beetles? What were they called again?
Riffle Beetles is what I refer to them as, and they're the ones that if you have a bunch of them and you kind of put them in your hand and you smell them, they give off that orangey, citrusy smell, which to predators, you know, would be a tactic to get predators away from them. But to us, it probably smells good.
Awesome. Very cool. I wish I had that ability. So Rosalie is asking, is there a notable difference in the species of critters you found as you moved along the river?
Yes, I'm glad you asked that. So when you think about rivers and streams, right? So we're in the headwaters, like the species you find in the headwaters, because like I mentioned, they may be more dependent on cold water and the groundwater, those upwellings, they're going to be different. And so if we move a few hundred feet down into bigger portions of the Blue River, you're going to find different species like your smallmouth bass and your stone rollers and different. So yes, there is definitely a noticeable difference between what's here and as you move downstream.
Right. Thank you so much for sharing that, Kim. Let's see what other questions we have in here. Are there specific threats to that ecosystem in this area? Asked Des.
Yeah, I mean, one of the threats we talked about invasive species. That can be a huge issue, particularly with the vegetation like eastern red cedar or the Chinese privet kind of overtaking native vegetation. In terms of threats in the watershed, well, I mean, there are, you know, you think about multiple interests that are pulling water from the river, right, between groundwater and surface water. There are sand mines within the area. And, you know, just our daily practices that we do on the land can impact our watersheds as well. Yeah, and one of the things too, you know, in terms of threats, with a lot of watersheds, riparian buffers aren't that good. But out here, they're pretty good. You know, they're very wide. You know, you saw as you're walking along here, you have the stream bank, but you have a lot of vegetation and a lot of trees that go out along the stream, and that's good. But in areas of, like more urban environments, you don't have good riparian buffers, right? A lot of people mow up to the stream edge, and there are very few trees. So, and you know, and as far as like buffers, the buffers really help the water quality. I had mentioned it helps to kind of slow down stream bank erosion. You really have those roots that kind of set in and hold that sediment or that dirt in place, right? You're going to have natural erosion, but you know, as long as you have a good width of vegetation and trees along your stream, that's going to really slow down the sediment. That's going to filter the water. So if you get a big runoff event and there might be herbicides or pesticides or fertilizers within that water, it's really going to help filter that water, right, before it gets to the actual stream. And so, you know, I'd say that's not so much a huge threat within the Blue River when it comes to riparian buffers, but there are other areas of the state where you'll see there is either no riparian buffer or it's very minimal. And so the protection for that watershed is not very good as it would be here.
Thank you, Kim. So we've got two questions I'm going to combine together because they are related, one from Barry and one from Joan. The two questions are, why is it important that there are no dams on the Blue River? And does the Blue River ever flood?
And I do want to correct that about no dams. So when we think about the Blue River, being one of only two, the other one being the Glover River in southeastern Oklahoma being one of only two places without dams on it. That's not quite accurate. When we think about dams, we think about these large dams, right? The Army Corps of Engineers has built, like when you think about Lake Eufaula, or you think about Keystone Dam in Tulsa. We don't have that here in the Blue River, but we do have Natural Resource Conservation Service, what they call flood control structures. They're a lot smaller dams that are designed to help prevent flooding on private land. So when you think about dams in general, like we don't have those large dams, right, within Blue River, but we have those smaller ones that help control, like that second question talked about flooding. So yes, flooding does happen. In fact, a few years ago, I believe there was like a 500-year flood event. And that's why it's extremely important when it comes to flooding that you have a very good floodplain. Like you have development that doesn't come like all the way up to that river or that stream. Like give those events that are going to happen, and it's probably going to become more frequent as time goes on, allow those areas to have these floodplains to allow that water to dissipate, right? Don't build your house right on the stream, or, give that water a chance. And so, yes, flooding does occur within the watershed, and it has caused damages to people's private land because, like I said, a lot of the watershed is pretty much privately owned. But it has a lot more chance to filter out into fields in less destruction than like you see in big urban environments.
I want to share a little bit about in-stream flows. It's kind of related to floods and how different species respond with different water levels.
Yes. So I don't know if a lot of you on the phone have heard of environmental flows. A lot of people refer to them as in-stream flows. And basically, so it's a non-consumptive use of water, right? So you think about you and I drinking water, right, from municipal sources coming from the Blue River. That's a consumptive use. But an environmental flow is actually keeping water in the stream for critters. So you think about spawning for fish, they need certain levels of water to spawn. And so there are some fish who lay their eggs out in the open in the water, and they need that kind of natural ebb and flow of environmental flows to protect what they're trying to do in the water, right? And so some species are dependent on certain water levels. And so an environmental flow is basically, keeping that water in the stream so that critters can do what they do throughout the year, right? And a lot of seasonal type basis as far as that goes. And so, environmental flows are extremely important. And it's something that the Nature Conservancy has been working on with folks like the Oklahoma Water Resources Board, which I heard they were on the phone earlier, different folks across the state, the Chickasaw, the Choctaw Nation. And so we're working on those things as it pertains to environmental flows. So it's really just providing that protection for the critters that are in the stream.
Super. Thank you, Kim. Okay, so I'm going to combine a question from Brent and a question from Clark here together. Are there any threatened species, fish and wildlife in the Blue River watershed? And are there any seaside alders in your vicinity?
Threatened species in the watershed. So there are some species of like least concern within the watershed. As far as aquatics, we don't have any endangered species per se in the watershed. Somebody mentioned Seaside alder. Yes, it is endemic to this area, and within this area that we're at, Seaside alder exists. We didn't find that today, but that is something that is here within the watershed, and that's actually a plant that lives along the rivers and streams and along the stream banks within the watershed.
All right, awesome. Thank you, Kim. We have just a few more minutes left, so we're going to try to see if we can get to a few more of these questions. What do darters eat, and are there any amphibians where you are? I know the answer to that one.
What do darters eat? So darters, they eat macroinvertebrates. They also will consume like even some of the algae in the water, like I talked about, those different organic nutrients, the leaf litter, the debris, that sort of thing. But they will consume macroinvertebrates in the water. And then as far as amphibians, Katie can tell you her story. We did catch a couple of frogs, but they wanted to escape and go back. So they weren't part of the show today. But a lot of those amphibians that are out right now are like your spring peepers and your chorus frogs. And I'm pretty sure the one that we caught was a cricket frog. So, and they're pretty small.
Could you explain what macroinvertebrates are?
Yes, so macroinvertebrates, they are a lot of those critters like the mayflies and the dragonflies that we found in the water today. I showed you some of those. I know the dragonfly obviously disappeared in our leaf pack, but some of those mayflies. So those are the critters that we refer to as macroinvertebrates.
All right, thank you, Kim. Okay, so I'm going to, this is a multi-question question. So here we go. As far as water consumption by humans, how much is used by us in general?
Well, it's interesting you say that. So in the beginning, and I don't know if you caught some of those statistics in the beginning, 71% of the earth is covered in water, but only 3% of that is fresh water. But less than 1%, in fact, I think the statistics I've seen is like 0.03% is actual water we can drink, right? So that might mean to me as well is that that's water that's already treated, right? So like you could technically drink this water, right? But I would recommend that you use like a water filter, things that you see when people are out like backpacking or whatever, like specific things to actually clean up that water. Because, there's bacteria in here that could cause you some issues if you were to just drink it as it is right now.
So do we know any statistics in regards to how much water is consumed by humans in general?
Yeah, I wouldn't know that statistic off the top of my head. I just know drinkable water is way less than 1%. So, okay. But one thing I will point out, I do have a statistic in my head. So for the Blue River watershed itself, I think about 34% of the water, that's between groundwater wells and surface water, is being used in the river. So
is there an optimal amount of what that consumption level should be for the Blue River watershed?
An optimal amount? That's a multifaceted question. That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, obviously, it's nice to know places like this exist, right? That doesn't have a lot of threats on it. There isn't a lot of consumption. It's extremely important that we protect our water resources. And so it's nice to know that you have a river that has 34% of the water being used, right? Whereas if you go to some other areas of the state, some other parts of the country, like 100% of that water is being used. And so it's kind of nice to know that these places exist, especially here in Oklahoma, especially because we're so prone to drought. Yeah.
All right, super. Thanks, Kim. We got one last question. Joan is asking if there's beavers along the Blue River.
There are beavers, little nature's engineers. Yes, I love beavers. And so you won't see them so much up here in the headwaters, but they'll be on like the main part of the river doing their little beaver fun that they do and building their dams. And yeah, so yes, there are beavers.
All right, so I think that wraps us up for the Q&A portion of today's session. Kim, just so you know, you are still on camera. I got you in the background. I just want to thank everyone for joining us. But before we go, we do have a few visuals we want to share with you in regards to some upcoming items. So Larissa's going to share a slide. And so if you want to learn more about our work along the Blue River, row on over. If you're a frog, hop on over If you want to row your canoe on over to nature.org/blue, that is where you can learn more about our work on the Blue River here in Oklahoma. Also, tomorrow is a big day. Tomorrow is Earth Day. So if you want to celebrate Earth Day, join us. Next slide. Join us, and you can go to nature.org/Earth Day. We will be hosting a very large event, a nationwide, a global event even. Anybody can join. There are lots of folks on there, biologists. Our new director of climate is going to be our climate scientist. Dr. Catherine Hayhoe will be on there. I heard a rumor that even Bill Nye, the science guy, is going to be on there. So it's a big, big event. So go to nature.org/Earth Day, and you can register for another wonderful opportunity to celebrate Earth Day. Whatever you do, enjoy, 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 and help us continue to take care of Mother Nature and all the critical resources that she provides us. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. It was so good to see your names. I can hardly wait to actually see your faces. But until then, stay safe, stay well, and we will catch you on our next webinar. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.